Hello, I am Melissa Weezyhan, the 4-H Youth Development Educator at the Purdue Extension Jennings County office, and I'm here today to introduce a virtual entomology program. Last August, I attended a field day at CPAC, and while there I saw a presentation by a young man named Jacob, who's a student at Purdue, and he was discussing his research there that he does about insects and watermelons. And at the conclusion of the field day, I reached out via email to the entomology department at Purdue and asked if one of their staff members would be willing to do a program for us in the future. And they put me in touch with Jacob, who actually did the presentation at the field day. And through various emails, we finally concluded that we would do a program in August of 2020. Of course, this has been a special year, and we knew that we probably couldn't do a program in person. So Jacob graciously offered to do a virtual program. So I met him out at CPAC this August, and he took us on a tour of his watermelon research project there in Butlerville. So I want you to come along with us as we follow Jacob through his project and learn more about the research that takes place at CPAC.
Hi, I'm Jacob Pachinka. I am a PhD student at Purdue University, where I've been since 2017, working in the field of entomology, which is the study of insects. And for my job, what I do is taking a look at, in agriculture, which there's plenty of that in Indiana, and seeing how insects are a crucial part of what we do. And a big part of what I work on are insect pollinators. And we may not always think about it, but when you look in the store in that fruit and vegetable section, scientists estimate that about 1 in 3 items in that grocery aisle for fruits and vegetables wouldn't be there without pollinators contributing to that. So that's the pollinators taking pollen from one flower, bringing it to another flower, and that's the only way you're gonna get that big delicious fruit. And speaking of the big delicious fruit, what I focus on is watermelon pollination, how watermelon grow in Indiana, which, in case you didn't know, Indiana is the number 5 producing watermelon state in the whole country. So there's a lot of watermelons grown in Indiana, and so it's important to understand what role insects are playing, both as pollinators and taking a look at what some pest insects might be going on there. So insects that might be chewing on the watermelon plants and making it so they might not grow as much. So trying to find that balance of making sure the bad bugs, the pests, aren't being a problem while we maintain good health for those beneficial pollinators and other insects that are doing a good job for us. And so where we're at is one of the research plots that I work at the Southeast Purdue Ag Center, which is one of the really cool research stations that Purdue has, where there's a whole staff who their job is to plant and take care of real sized farm plots. And so I can come in and take research on them with specific needs. They know that I need this thing of watermelons planted, and so we come out in the middle of May and we set up the plots and we transplant little watermelons in. Usually in the middle of May, watermelon plants are only a couple leaves, they're really small, and you take them and you plug them into the ground, and this is about 11 weeks after that. So the watermelon plants, once they get going and they get a few sunny, humid Indiana days, they really shoot up. And if you give it enough time, you'll have more than a few of these fruits that we know we like to enjoy during the summer. And it's really important to understand what role insects have in these things. Going from a small plant to a nice melon that we can enjoy all summer long. Here, he may look really small, but the striped cucumber beetle is the #1 pest in Indiana, in this region, for not just watermelons, but all other cucurbit crops, which is the family that make up squash, pumpkins, zucchini, and all the melons. And while he may look small, when these beetles get into the plot, all they want to do is eat and eat and eat. And so they'll munch on the leaves, they'll munch on the stems, and they'll, in June and July, they'll lay their eggs in the roots of the watermelon plant, and their larvae, which are the young beetles, will grow up and munch on the roots. And then a second generation around August will come up. And so just when you think you're out of the woods and the beetles are gone, there's the next round that comes up, and those beetles sometimes will eat on the rind of the watermelon, which is a really big problem because even though it doesn't hurt the actual fruit inside, It's really hard for a watermelon grower to sell those at the store. And so that's an unmarketable watermelon fruit. So it's not just damaging the plant, but damaging those fruit that themselves, because when you're in the store picking one out, you want one that looks really delicious, and the feeding and scarring the outside of the watermelon doesn't make it very appetizing. So it's really important for us to be able to control these cucumber beetles and keep them at levels below where, sure, they might nibble on the plants a little bit, and a few of the beetles are okay, but there's not so many of them that they wipe out the entire field. So what a big part of this project is incorporating something called integrated pest management, which isn't a new concept, but IPM, as it's often called, is really important when you're trying to control a insect pest in a crop field. And it could be watermelon, or it could be soybeans, or any other crop in Indiana. And it's using multiple tools that it's not just, oh, we have one thing that we know might help us with the beetles, and doing that every time, no matter what. And oftentimes that's the use of insecticides. And insecticides can be very effective. You can come out here, spray a field, and knock down the pest insects, and that does a great job. But insects are very notorious for being able to take whatever new insecticide that we come up with, chew it up a little bit, and spit it right back at us. You developing things called resistance, or being able to get out of the way and hide when those insecticide sprays are going out there, and then coming up and being active as soon as those sprayers are out of the field. So it's important to look at multiple tools to control insects, and part of that is including the use of economic thresholds. And what that is doing things like scouting. So going out to a watermelon field, and you might pick a plant, and you look all around the plant and see how many of the pests you can count. And so you might not see very many pests at all, and you might see quite a few of them. And taking a random sample throughout your field and averaging that together gives you a good idea. Are there pests in my field? And if there are a few pests in your field, are they at a high enough level that there might be you might need to apply an insecticide or do some other control measure? Or are there just a few beetles or other pests on one plant or the other, and it's not enough of them to cause any sort of problem? And so part of what my job is coming out to these watermelon fields and doing that kind of scouting and seeing throughout all summer, as these plants get bigger, how many of the pests are we seeing out there, and are they ever a problem for a watermelon field in Indiana? So watermelons have flowers, but not all flowers are the same. When you look in a patch of watermelon, most flowers will look like this, and these are the male flowers, and these have pollen on them. And what needs to happen for pollination to occur is a bee has to visit this male flower, get pollen attached to its fuzzy body, and then move on to a female flower. And you can tell it's a female flower because underneath the petals is a little baby melon. And so what happens is the bee will land on this flower, transfer pollen to this, and as long as enough bees go from a male flower to a female flower, the petals will fall off, and this small melon will be fertilized and start to grow. And it takes about 5 to 6 weeks. And then that small female flower will turn into one of the really large melon flowers. And it's cool because the plants will produce new female flowers all year. And so this one was a female flower that was probably fertilized 2-3 weeks ago. So not quite there yet. You wouldn't want to pick it yet, but it's getting there. And in a few weeks, we'll pick this melon, and it'll be someone's weekend treat. So when you see a stack of watermelons in the grocery store, a lot of the times you maybe slap it and listen to the noise to hear if it's ripe or not. But it's much easier to tell if it's ripe or not when you're in the field, because if you find a melon and trying to decide whether or not it's ripe, you take the stem and you follow it, and you find the first tendril or the curlicue, and if it's brown and dried up like this, that's how the plant tells you that this melon is fully sweet, fully ripe, and it's ready for you to pick it off, and you can take it back and enjoy it. And another good sign is that nice yellow white belly where it's been sitting on the ground. So 2 good signs that this is a ripe melon that's pretty good to eat. So the goal of this project has been to try to find that balance. So we know that using insecticides can be a useful tool to control insect pests, but in a crop like watermelon that need insects to pollinate, it's really important that we provide a benefit to those pollinators and don't provide an environment that's so hazardous that they can't survive in it. And this research, I've been doing it since 2017, so this is the third field season growing watermelons in 5 of the Purdue Ag Centers all over Indiana. And what's been really cool to see is over multiple years, the melon plots that receive insecticides routinely, and even though there might be a few more beetles in the other plot that don't get insecticides on a calendar basis, the plots that adopt that integrated pest management or IPM approach see no difference in yield. In fact, in some of our plots, when insecticides aren't applied, those watermelon yields are higher, and that's driven by those beneficial pollinators. And so when we sit in front and watch how many bees are traveling to and from different watermelon flowers, we see that pollination traveling from a male flower to a female flower almost 3 times as much in our plots that don't have those insecticide applications. So even though there might be a few pests munching on those plants, the benefit that those pollinators provide is so much greater. And it's really important to consider that this isn't just something, oh, watermelons do this and no other crop does. A lot of other crops all across the country are given insecticides just because it provides an insurance mentality. A farmer can go to sleep soundly knowing I did something and I helped control insects, not always thinking about that for every pest insect in their plot, there might be dozens and dozens of insects that are providing a benefit to that field, or we don't even know what they are yet, just because there's so many insects out there that scientists just either haven't discovered yet, or we've seen them and we just don't know what role they play. And insects are so important because so many plants and flowers and fruit need insects to pollinate. So many larger birds and mammals, our insects are their primary source of food. And so insects form such a crucial role in our environments, not just in agriculture, but in natural systems as well, that it's important to understand what they do and what role they play. And that's part of why being an entomologist is so important. And I feel really fortunate that I started this career. I've been doing entomological research for over 8 years now, and it's given me opportunities to see my work published in scientific journals and have people from other countries talk to me about the things that I've done and how they could apply that to their own system, and giving me a chance to travel myself. I've gotten a chance to attend courses in South America where I see how agriculture is done down there, and make connections and friends with people who, even though I may not work with them, I keep in touch with them and just get a wider perspective of what goes on in other parts of the world and how different some things are, but how regardless of where you are, the important role that insects play, and how important it is that we realize that there are jobs out there like the one that I do for other people to keep exploring and keep learning new things about these insects and that important role they play in the environment. To provide pollination, a lot of the times in Indiana, watermelon growers will find a beekeeper who they know and rent those honeybee hives so those honeybees can live next to that field and provide that service throughout the year, which is why we have the hive that you can see here. And in our half acre of watermelons, we have 2 honeybee hives. Normally you usually stock a melon plot for every acre. You try to have a good, healthy hive of honeybees, but we wanted to put more than enough out there so we weren't limited by pollination. And the reason we have these honeybees, that I put them out there and I take care of them throughout the year, and I also just see how the environment, things like insecticides, things like what kind of plants are surrounding our experiment, and I want to see how those factors influence the health of the honeybees. So every couple of weeks I'll come out and I'll weigh this colony to see how much weight they've put on and all the honey and pollen they've gathered. And I'll also do things like measuring the colony for varroa mite. Varroa mite is an important parasite to consider for honeybees. It's a very small tick-like organism that lives on the honeybee, and it will, imagine it being on the bee's armpit, and it munches on the blood and the fat of the bee, and it's like you or I having a volleyball stuck to us, sucking our blood. So you can imagine how stressful that is for a bee. And those varroa mites also transmit a lot of diseases. So I measure if there's any mites bothering these bees, in addition to how many new bees are going, how much is the queen laying, and how much new brood every couple of weeks is that hive being produced, just to get a good idea of, is this a healthy hive in this melon plot, or based upon the things going on in this field, is this hive not doing as well as a neighboring hive that has the same kind of weather or conditions, but just might not have as many insecticide exposures to it. And that's really important because a beekeeper who's renting bees to a watermelon grower wants healthy bees that at the end of the year are happy and can produce honey that beekeeper can harvest and sell. And the watermelon grower really wants those bees to do well, because if those bees aren't out there pollinating, then that watermelon grower might not get enough yield for his profit. So it's really important for both those two to understand how what's going on in the environment is going to affect the pollinators, not just the managed ones like honeybees, but the many different species of wild bees that are actually a majority of the pollinators in Indiana. So while it's really important to consider how we take care of these honeybees, they're not the only players that are really important to consider when we're thinking about conserving pollinators. This is a frame from inside of the hive, and there's a few really neat things to take a look at inside. So I provided in early May this wooden frame, and there was just a thin layer of plastic, and everything that came out is all made by the bees. All of this comb, they've collected pollen and honey, nectar from flowers, and built this out. And there's a few really neat things you can see. This top layer, that's all what's called capped honey. So if I stick my finger in there, you can see that's the honey that we're mostly familiar with, right? That you can buy at the grocery store, that the bees do such a good job of producing. But what's also in here are capped brood. So what brood is another word for the baby bees living inside of the colony. And the queen bee, there's only one queen that's laid the eggs for every bee in a single hive, which can be tens of thousands of them as the hive grows. And she lays eggs into each individual of these chambers, and all of the other bees living in there, some of them that are called nurse bees, their role is to take care of those eggs. So once the egg hatches and it's a larvae, just a tiny little grub-looking baby, they'll feed that baby bee as it grows and grows, and clean up that cell as it leaves droppings behind. And when that bee is ready to pupate, which is going from a larva to a pupa, which is the same thing when you see a caterpillar going into a chrysalis or a cocoon before it turns into a butterfly. That's the same stage of metamorphosis. It's just for honeybees, they have these capped brood cells, which inside there is the bee, and as it goes from a grub, a adult bee will come out. And what's really neat, you can see, is there's a brand new adult bee starting to chew her way out of inside of one of those cells. So she's munching her way out. It'll take her a little bit to dry off and get her wings going, but as soon as she does, she'll get a new job from the hive, whether it's cleanup, whether it's as a nurse bee, or even fanning the hive. So on really hot, humid days, there'll be bees that sit in front of the hive entrance and angle their wings and beat them as fast as they can, so air will blow through the hive so it doesn't stay as hot in there, and they get some fresh airflow going through.
Thank you, Jacob, for sharing all that wonderful information with us. And that concludes our tour for today. I also want to thank Dan and Joel at CPAC for allowing us to visit and to film the video. They also allowed us to use the bee suit and some other equipment to do all this. I want to thank my daughter, Sydney Weezyhand, who was the camera lady behind all this too, and she was instrumental in helping me with the video. But before we end the total program, I want to talk a little bit more about the Entomology project in 4-H and how to get signed up for 4-H. Of course, 4-H is a youth development program for youth in grades K through 12. In Jennings County, we do offer a mini 4-H, and that's for kids entering grades K1 and 2. And then regular 4-H is for youth in grades 3 through 12. We will start enrollment in October, and you can sign up by contacting the Purdue Extension office in Jennings County. We're located in the Government Center in Vernon behind the courthouse. But one of the great projects that we do offer in the 4-H program is called Entomology, and we don't have very many people that take that project now. So part of the reason I wanted to do this program is to introduce entomology to people in our community, and especially to our youth members, and hopefully spark an interest in this project. But when you join 4-H, we ideally like for you to go to a club, and at your club meetings that hopefully meet monthly, you'll meet new friends and you'll have a club leader that will advise you about projects you can take and other opportunities in the 4-H program. We also give all of our members a handbook like this that explains projects in detail, and for entomology there's a whole section about what you would exhibit. And we also have curriculum for most of the projects. So if you signed up for entomology, depending on what grade level you are in, you would get a specific manual that teaches you educational information about insects or whatever topic you're going to choose for what project you're going to take. And then you would do activities in these manuals, and then most of the projects exhibits are based on the manuals too. But for entomology, it's really cool that you can take a box collection, and each grade has a number of insects they can show. The top of my box is getting a little bit cloudy due to the weather. But Richard Becker, the Ag and Natural Resources educator in Jackson County, he has lent this to me several times, but his sons were in entomology and they did the bug collection projects and exhibit those at their county fair. And he's kept them to use for program purposes, and he's allowed me to borrow those. But this is an example of what a child in grade 12 would exhibit for their projects. So for all of our projects, if you sign up, like I said, you'd get the handbook, you'd get educational materials, you would read that, do the activities, create the exhibit, and this is what would be exhibited at our county fair. Now, the entomology project is a state fair project also, so if you did well at our county fair in Jennings County, then you could possibly advance to the state fair and have it exhibited there and judge, and hopefully win a ribbon or award. But like I said earlier, our 4-H program year would start in October. Kids in grades K through 12 can enroll then and hopefully start going to either club meetings virtually or in person and learning more about what projects they can take. For more information about the Purdue Extension Jennings County 4-H program, we do encourage you to visit our Facebook page, which is titled Purdue Extension Jennings County. We also have a website, and you can always call our office at 812-352-3033. So I hope today's program about entomology sparked an interest in you to do something different, to learn about something new, and maybe take a project like this and turn it into a career like Jacob has.